There is a lesson in my mother's actions. This time it was a soporific drug, but an assassin could use something much more lethal. I can't help but be a little wary of her, as the notion that I have a mother near me was so overwhelming I forgot her true identity. How much of her helpless act was a farce or real? Decima holds out a cup of real CF, in the morning. Ship morning anyway, since on Sutha there would be all the time zones at once. Thanks love, I say with a grateful smile. All the officers on the ground are dead, she announces in a grave voice. I frown and power up the implant. All of them? And their replacements? I ask with trepidation. Them too. Some type of tyrannid monkeys with sharp claws. They can tear through tank armor. I hum to myself, scrolling through my mental database. Genestealers. Luckily, the grenadiers and the armored regiment's officers were simple nobles or promoted veterans. The Battle Brothers lost many of our own, Captain. The Tyranids almost broke into the fortress monastery. Without the unexpected arrival of your personal guard, well, it would have been much worse. My own Astartes guard explains in a calm voice. I know that voice though. Ludvius uses it when death is near. With Tyrannid access to the Scythe chapter's Genocide banks, I am afraid to contemplate what could happen. Genestealers could manufacture or grow at least Titan-sized organisms, but in the millions. As bad as they are in space, the damnids are 1,000 times worse on the ground or even deep underground. At least this wasn't a hive world, so civilian losses are comparatively small, despite the wide-scale destruction. I need to speak with the chapter master. I tell Ludvius in between gulps of warm CF. Not quite coffee, but close enough. He just stares at me. Dead? I ask in surprise. The old Marine commander was a legend from the old times, a contemporary of Primarchs and the living Emperor. He couldn't die so easy. The tech priests have recovered his brain and allowed him to speak once more. But Obade refuses to be sustained by a metal body. He named Captain Thorsera as the new chapter master. Xenophon, a Hunter-class _destroyer has also arrived with the rest of the Scythes, and they have begun purging the Xenos at full strength. The Space Marine concludes in a sad voice. I frown and set the CF away, just as Rose arrives and gestures Decima to leave. To her credit, my wife asks me wordlessly for consent. You leave as well, Ludvius. The Inquisition has big secrets too. I explain politely and nod towards the door. He listens this time, and leaves taking Decima with him. Yes, my Rose? I ask politely and start warming my shoulders and back. Perhaps it's time to begin the anti-aging treatment already. I'm only human, and I have grandkids already. Get my clan gene treatments as well. Loyal people were worth their cost. The Xenophon encountered a large hive fleet heading this way. It was only the beacon shift that saved them, as their course changed by a tiny degree. My lover announces in a stern tone, her face filled with worry. More Tyranids, and we're fresh out of munitions. I muse out loud, and hug the Inquisitor to my side. She nods and leans into me. At least we gave the Necrons a bloody nose. Astropaths report 16 Tyranids fleets heading for Mandragora. I lean over and power up the cogitator on my desk. The system opens on the holoscreen, Sutha surrounded by forts and debris, and 150 ships that will barely blunt a big bug swarm. There are positions that must not be defended, battles that must not be fought. I quote from old memories. We evacuate Sutha. Armor and rock to seal the Pharos. And, incineration. I muttered to myself. Sometimes the best way to win is not to fight. The Marines will not listen. She complains in a low voice. I think on that for a minute. It is a bit too soon, but I don't have to promise a timeline. They will. Get me a meeting with Obade and Thorsera, sealed by the Inquisition. Rose blinks and takes out her rosette. Yet another amazing secret, miracle worker? She asks rhetorically. I almost nod, before I stop. Secrets are of the past. For the future, we call them visions. She smiles and holds out her tarot cards. In flux, the future is. And yet you're certain of this vision? Primarch Guilliman will return. I know it will happen. The Eldar know it too. And now you do. I whisper the great secret while loading the Geller STC design and spinning it around, hoping to find anything of use. The phase ion components should have worked perfectly, but they didn't. Somehow, the warp still managed to get through. Perhaps it was not the machine itself, but its spirit. Cloned blank tissue, or perhaps pariah nerves and neurons? Justin was the key of this conundrum. I heard of rumors, the Primarch's cursed wound healing under stasis field. Would a Geller field help? Rose asks while glancing at my modified design with suspicion. This broken machine? It can barely protect a small Corvette, and even that not very well. I shake my head. If only it was that simple. Guilliman needs a god to help him. One such as Ned, the god of death. Not sure why, as Eldar are beyond me just like Necrons. Perhaps a test, or stirring more revolt and bloodshed. Rose is still an Inquisitor, and an Odozi knows at that. There is only one true god, the Emperor of humanity. She yells at me in a Pisca scream. There are other species in the universe, my dear. Yes, we have our Emperor. But Orcs have more Korgork, the Eldar have others, even the Blood Angels have an incipient divine spirit, the Sanguinator. Not to mention the great enemy. I say in a peaceful tone, and sipping more CF. Sadly, the drink has gone cold, just like my Rose. You want an alliance with the Eldar? The treacherous, slimy, craven. The Inquisitor growls and seems rather pissed. I am not that important, my Rose. I know of it, but nobody asked me. It will happen anyway, at levels high above ours. The point is, the sides will follow me into hell for this. And we get to exterminate 1,000,000 Tyrannid ships. I tell her in a soft voice, and draw her into a hug. Slowly she calms down, and resumes her normal demeanor. Into hell? You're bolder than I thought, my dear trader. And I suppose you want me to join you? I kiss her neck and ear gently. You need to think bigger, my love. A revived Primarch has a test. Who else is wounded to death? Rose tenses in my arms, and grabs me tight. Truly? She asks in a breathless voice. Eventually, yes. And even then, that's only one goal of mine. You felt the shadow in the warp, right? I proclaim in a level tone. Damn Tyrannid ability. It's horrible. She says with revulsion. Now imagine humanity, with the same power. Immunity to warp and demonic influence. No more mutations. No more sorcerers or Xenos starting cults with fake miracles. I whisper as my hands grope and squeeze her full buttocks. Like mother, like son, huh? She growls in my ear and bites it too. I fall on the bed and begin kissing my Rose all over, exploiting the moment for fun and profit. The Inquisitor is more skilled and better trained, so I quickly lose and get ridden like a bull. I don't mind losing though. Much later, she rests on my chest and thinks it over. We depend on psychers for galactic-wide navigation and communications. If we all become blanks. I caress her soft back, where scars can still be felt from some intense surgery or torture training. Yes, we do. You realize all of that is going through the enemy domain? They can see everything we send via astropaths. They can see our ships and what's inside. They can see into our minds and souls. And they can change it with some effort. We resist with prayer or logic, with Geller fields or phase ion, but it's not a good strategy, is it? I wonder out loud. What else can we do? She asks in a moment of weakness. Well then, my beloved Rose. Glad you asked. Escorted by Ludvius and followed by Rose and her retinue, I take the Mona Lisa and land on the planet, right next to the wreckage of the Citadel. A neophyte marine with a flamethrower is casually incinerating bodies, while further away tech priests and servitors perform Binharic rites and convert the wounded into undying servants of the Omnissiah. Nobody bats an eye at the scene, even though I can barely keep myself from hurling at the smells and sights. War never changes, not the smell of death, not the burning buildings and the cries of the orphans. Hopefully everyone still alive will get evacuated after I talk with the Astartes. A dead body jumps up and sprints towards me, glass-like claws emerging from its hands. Ludvius swings his power maul like a feather and crushes the infected body into a pulp. All around, dozens of more bodies begin rising, undead but infected with Tyrannid synapses. A Death Guard draws his bolter and unloads his clip in a single second, scoring a dozen headshots without breaking stride. I contribute too, my hell pistol firing blazing hot beams and blasting a single enemy into hell with only 3 shots. Then I search around, but there aren't any more targets. Rose giggles and blows softly on her fingertips, violet flames disappearing by magic. At least you didn't panic, she comments while Ludvius holds a thumb up in praise. The time to panic is after the fight is over, I declare, trying to sound cool. A Death Watch snorts amused, so it probably didn't work. Then I check the more distant neophytes, catching a few giggles aimed at us. A damn prank, using live enemies. Possibly Astartes' humor, macabre as it may be. Justine steps beside me, and checks me over seeming worried. You're too slow, she announces in a sad voice. I just shrug and walk faster. Damn killers, all of them. I'm a thinker, not a damn grunt. A bit later, our guards stop as the Scythes on a guard takes over the escort. Not even Ludvius is allowed into their sacred sanctuary. Just me and Rose, and 1,000 space marines, and perhaps 10 times as many aspirants. These are recruits undergoing testing, selected from the local population. They don't look so tough, not yet. I could probably take one, if I'm wearing my power armor, and he doesn't. I expect many of them will be inducted early and assigned as neophytes to replenish lost brothers. The Marines spend lives with same ease as they spend bolter rounds. Then again, I do the same thing, on an even larger scale. One ship would have thousands of crew if it was small and millions for a battleship. The regiments under my command are much the same, line infantry regiments reaching 40,000 guardsmen while armor regiments have much fewer soldiers but greater firepower. Chapter Master Thorsira, congratulations on the promotion. I tell the man with a small nod. He stares at me in silence, then turns towards the Inquisitor. We will listen to your maverick commander, Inquisitor. My chaplain is bringing the coffin with Captain Obadiah, right now. Yeah, I don't amount to much right now, because Astartes respect only strength. But knowledge is power too. And that's my chosen field of battle. Soon enough, the former chapter master is floated inside the lavish meeting room, filled with purity seals and campaign trophies. Skulls, severed arms holding weapons, flags and armor bits. The chaplain can stay. He has seen the Tyrannid fleet, right? I asked to make sure. I have. I was on board the Xenophon when it dropped out of warp right next to the Xenobugs. Hornindle says proudly. What do you need of me, Lord Pef? I am waiting to die and join the Emperor. Obadiah asks from his coffin. I glance at Rose and nod. These words are forever sealed under Inquisition's mandate as the agent of the throne. Is this understood? She demands in a warped voice that tingles in the back of mind. Some kind of engram spell was infused in the words. The 3 Marines agree with some reluctance. I am rogue trader Pef Lancefire. You may dismiss me as a merchant or profiteer, like many such captains are. But my warrant right here says, the bearer of this warrant speaks with our imperial voice. And I tell you, the Primarchs will return. Robute Gulaman first, and then more. I proclaim in my sternest voice. I admit I practiced it a little, though using different words. It works, and how it works. The chaplain explodes in a golden glow, his eyes burning with bluish warp light. A scroll in his hand amplifies the light a dozen times. A feeling of wrongness washes over me and I feel my knees give way. Damn psychers. At least this one is friendly, for a minimal definition of the word. I don't feel any taint, Captain. The spiritual leader of the Scythes declares after a long minute. To the side, Rose is polishing her nails without a care. I mean, there are no organs or brains flying around yet, so it must be okay. With some effort I rise to my feet and push forward, then punch the crazy Marine in the jaw. I think my wrist breaks inside the power armor anyway. Enough, Brother Hornindle. The chapter master commands in a sharp tone, and the glow lowers 10 times, but not entirely. I rub my wrist and wait for the Astartes to talk, but the man turns toward the coffin. You know this man better than me, brother. Is he mad? A short metallic laugh sounds from the coffin. He deciphered the use of Pharos in a few minutes. And you've seen the ring of forts in our orbit. Plus, he has the warrant. I asked Lord Pef to divert the psychic beacon on the Necron world of Mandragora. The attempt was successful beyond belief. Hive Fleet Kraken is changing course, ignoring human worlds and eliminating the ancient menace like attack dogs. Soon, the Necron dynasty will be crushed under trillions of tyrannid organisms. Rose speaks in my support, making the chaplain perk up in wonder. Wonderful news, if it could save humanity from both threats at once. He remarks in a hopeful voice. You forget one thing, Lord Hornindle. Sutai is emitting a powerful psychic beam of stellar intensity to illuminate the Necron capital in the warp. And that hive fleet you had encountered is coming here to investigate, and eat any life forms it finds. Trees, crops, animals or people, it's all the same for the hive. I explain in polite voice, then step away before he remembers I punched him. If he even felt it. You have a plan for another flawless victory? The chapter master wonders with a piercing gaze. Well, I wish I could, but I lack the tools to build the weapons I would need for something like this. Somewhat. I have a plan to exterminate this hive fleet and save everyone on Suta. You won't like it, but you can complain to your Primarch about my crazy ideas. I answer with a shrug. Rose turns around and leaves without a word. What plan? Speak already, damn traitor. Obadiah asks from its coffin. Well, we have this big fleet here, enough to load everyone on board. Then you change location and let me kill all the Nids by myself. I always wanted to see the Exterminatus in action. I say with a joking voice and turn around to jog after Rose. I don't get very far, of course. Damn Marines are too fast. An armored hand catches my throat and turns me around. You're too slow. The damn chaplain explains politely, and punches me with his other hand. His wrist doesn't break. I wake up in a Medicaid bed, and groggily open my eyes to see my big friend smile at me in praise. You punched an Astartes, Lord Pef. Even more, you're still alive. The Emperor must be watching over you. Ludvius declares proudly and turns to the side, to let Decima and Hannah come to my side. My mouth is bound by metal wires, so I can't say anything clever. Not that my actions were that clever anyway. Brave but foolish, yes. Hannah extends a thin straw and pours soup down my throat, while Decima checks my plumbing for some reason. You haven't grown balls of steel, my Lord Captain. I was worried for a moment. She quips in a teasing voice and pats them gently. I'll never hear the end of it, will I? Rest and heal, Pef. The evacuation has already begun. Hannah whispers in a loving voice and kisses my cheek. It doesn't hurt, so I must be rather well anesthetized. Oh well. If I'm to stay in bed for a while, might as well rest a bit. I drift into sleep again. A week later I can move my hands again, and ask for my cogitator. The flesh is weak, but my mind still works. Might as well use it. Margus Minoris takes station to my side, and we start working on STC templates in eerie silence. I mean, I have a wire linking my implant to the cogitator, and I can even type, with some effort. You should see the other guy. I write on the holoscreen. I did, Captain. He seems very healthy. Minoris replies without getting the hint. Ludvius does get it, but merely rolls his good eye. I suppose the Scythes' chaplain was a merciful guy and didn't use full strength. My head would have been pulverized in that case. Anyway, I start downloading everything I have on data slates, filling them with old and new STC designs for the Forged Worlds, while another one holds my personal inventions and projects. Rose is dealing with the Pharos problem, scanning the sounding board with 100 Mechanicus devices and a few non-human ones. Even if we don't get everything from it, it will be a start for my greatest project, the non-warp technology-based ships and calms. Something of this magnitude would change the Imperium just as much as waking the Emperor or spreading blank genes to every human. It's very advanced tech, but if others could do it, humanity can do it too. There are plenty genial magi and tech priests in the galaxy, and I don't intend to stop at them. The Tau have some incipient designs of their own, slow and low-ranged, but they work. The Necrons have an entire civilization built outside the warp completely. And there are more species out there. Even the Tyranids use gravity-based travel that don't involve the warp. Their synaptic hive mind is still warp-based though, since pariahs can disconnect their organisms from the collective in close proximity. Because of my leave of absence, Rose and her crew took over the fleet and efforts, but she seems to do okay. Well, Inquisitors are expected to lead entire crusades sometimes, so I expect she has the training. She has her skilled retinue as well, with the weasel guy almost ready to become an Inquisitor himself. Rose has kept him away from me, probably to spare my life if he learns too much about my activities. A month later I am mobile again, and my jaw is almost healed. Still no talking, but I get some anti-aging injections and gene boosts from an unspecified donor. The potential donor list is very small and I don't need a whole hand to count the likely suspects. It is just in time, as a Mechonicus ship from Antax arrives with extra supplies and munitions. In a few days the fleet gets resupplied and gets ready for a decent fight. Our destroyers are however sent away, loaded with refugees and their meager possessions. They would serve little purpose for the next part, but they can still carry thousands of people to safety. Meanwhile, the bigger ships get loaded with fresh food and crop seeds, as well as expensive machinery and relics. The scythes drag their feet a little, possibly not too happy at abandoning their post. Then a patrolling frigate at the edge of the system detects the hive fleet and everything moves much faster. Civilians are rushed into shuttles and landers for evacuation, and I divert nearly 100,000 young women on the Mechonicus ship. Females are a precious resource, because they can give birth to an entire new population with barely any male input. They get sent to Retribution, to help rebuild a healthy stock of citizens on the blasted world. And since these people from Suta are the fertile recruiting ground for a Space Marine chapter, I expect their children will have good genes and limitless potential. Instead, the Astartes keep a watch on their precious boys and teenagers, escorting them on board the battleships, so they don't lose potential recruits. Mars cruisers begin Nova Cannon harassment. I command while keeping an eye on the timer. The Hive fleet tendril is slowing down, but they still move fast. Huge explosions erupt among the cluster of bioships, but they keep coming. The frigates are filled with more refugees and little of their wealth, and they start leaving in the opposite direction. Light cruisers next, and then the battle cruisers. The Victory-class battleships also fire their Nova cannons till they deplete all the special shells and leave as well. Suta is now empty and deserted, though still teeming with animal and plant life. A bait for my trap. Only by firm action and resolute faith will mankind survive. No sacrifice is too great. No treachery too small. 11,111,011. I nod wisely, both towards Rose and my implant's advice. We have a couple of her amazing atmospheric _incinerator torpedo prepared for this moment. I don't want to use the other form of exterminatus, because the Pharos would get destroyed if the planet blows up. Just need to erase all life, and make Suta irrelevant for the bugs. But not yet. The litany inches away, while the automated forts and servitors keep firing at the immense cloud of bioships. The Nova cannons took a toll on them, but we didn't have thousands of precious shells to make a real dent. We have torpedoes and missiles and plasma generators on the fortified asteroids, and they help, killing thousand after thousand of void organisms, and wounding many more. In the end, the hunger is too great and the Tyranids start ignoring the defenses and swarm the planet from all sides, although orbital forts unleash all their ordnance at point-blank range, or detonate their reactors for extra damage. At the edge of the system, we wait for the Hive fleet to englobe the planet, and then we spring the trap. 5 Exterminatus-grade torpedoes fire at once, from 5 different angles. The atmosphere of Suta ignites, searing everything and exterminating many of the Hive ships and their landed troops. A psychic scream of rage emerges from the planet, the Tyranids furious for being denied biomass and energy replenishment. We speed away at sublight, and slowly escape the silence blocking our escape. The planet's crust melts and flows under the immense heat, and so do the Tyranids. The planet still burns a month later when we finally take a last Auspex reading and enter the walk towards Istobon 3. This forged world will soon be invaded by the Chaos, but I aim to defend them as best as I can. They could have a whole new fleet built for me, and get lucky enough to have superior numbers available when the traitors arrive. Plus, Istobon_3 would have many warp-based weapons and templates that I might disperse in other places. During the journey, I assemble a few land raider variants equipped with atomantic reactors and plasma guns, as well as 3 multi-lasers and a crack missile launcher. Also, another one with a Vanquisher gun, autocannons and flamer guns, in an Imperial Guard variant similar to the Lehman Russ but a dozen times more durable. Much cheaper too, because energy weapons are quite expensive at larger sizes. These tanks are big enough and the reactor supplies more than enough energy. They can also carry 50 troops with ease, maybe even 100 guardsmen in thin flak jackets, instead of carapace armor. I simplify the tank tracks a little, and add extra Auspex sensors for night vision, because searchlights are not that useful. This takes me 5 weeks, so I'm all healed up and prepared when the litany arrives at Astobon. I get a royal treatment as I debark on the Forged World, possibly because of the spread of my exploits, possibly because of the Astartes Honor Guard or the Inquisitor. Greetings, peddler of knowledge. The Omnissiah has listened to my prayers and brought you to us, alive and well. Is your mandible healed enough to speak? The Archmagos asks politely. This, only a flesh wound, fabricator. An Astartes with psychic powers punched me, for no reason. I explain politely and see him tilt his head in doubt. He punched our chaplain first, tech priest. It's not our fault his flesh is weak. Captain Thracius explains with a small chuckle. The fabricator waves his mechadendrites for some unknown reason. Probably saying stupid humans or such. I turn towards my rather large guard and gesture them away. Let's talk in private, fabricator. I demand in a soft voice, and hold out a data slate as a gift. Indeed, Lord Pef. Let's see what the Omnissiah has blessed us with. He allows in a slightly amused tone while riffling through the STC designs and leading me to his meeting room. Ludvius holds his thumb up in encouragement. I smile inward and rub 2 neurons together for luck. The fabricator really likes the new Land Raider tanks, and mostly everything I have for sale, including the glaive relic I got from the Scythes, and all my variants of STCs including multi-lasers, personal missiles launchers and upgraded lasguns. I almost feel he wants to lock me in his basement to produce more upgraded templates for the glory of Omnissiah. In fact, he tells me this to my face, but I pretend it's a good joke. I wouldn't be able to explore the vast galaxy from a secure research facility, Archmagos. Still, I wonder if you would be interested in another type of collaboration. I ask in a jovial tone, and sip some hugely expensive wine imported from Terra itself. The tech priest blinks from his still human eye, and nods cautiously. My mother is a blank, and so am I. Also my son is a blank too. Very useful trait, for a special machine that could withstand the warp, or psychers. If you could gather some magi biologists and set them on this task, I am certain everyone in the Imperium would be interested in blank machine spirits. Your renown as a great Forged World would grow as well, if it works. I whisper and hold my hand out for a blood sample. The fabricator hesitates for a whole minute, no doubt cogitating deeply on higher implications of such machines, and the risks involved. And in exchange? He asks in a wary voice. I just shrug. My purpose is not equal trade after all. Merely providing humanity with the means to defend itself. My mother is also here, the blonde woman in the Inquisitor's retinue. She could use some Mechanicus upgrades for her difficult job. I ask after a second of deliberation. Not asking for anything would be too suspicious. Another long minute passes, then the fabricator opens his cogitator for a trade window, filled with nice goodies. Filial duty is rare, but you show humanity and modesty. Nothing for yourself, but only the best for your mother. If only more people were like you, Lord Pef. The Archmagos says and plays some cants and hymnals from his Vox speakers. I nod and start scrolling through the list. A Sentinel Walker template would be useful, and a dozen Vortex torpedoes would ruin anyone's day. Then I find a Deimos_Vindicator pattern, based on the popular Rhino tank chassis. A similar model is called Deimos_Vindicator_Laser_Destroyer, which has 4 las cannons in a rhomboid pattern, for even greater firepower. This configuration could be adapted for multi-lasers and ship weapons, perhaps for the Sentinel and Hydras, so I am quite pleased to obtain them. I admit, I was looking for a different machine called a Macarius tank, but nobody has it around here. I say politely and start selecting replacements for everything I lost in the Suit-Her campaign. 2 fighter squadrons, 800 Chimera tanks and variants, and a full loadout of missiles and torpedoes. I stop when the fabricator signals discreetly the limit has been reached. Tell me about those corvettes, being made everywhere these days. He asks in a patient voice. I sip more wine and think it over. It's a cache of ancient designs, each with different foci. Antax makes these long-range explorers, Metallica makes classic models for the Navy, and Tigris builds a special type for rogue traders. I do have a partial template left, but I haven't figured out what kind of weapons they are supposed to use. Maybe gravity or infrared weapons, or both. Check it over if you want, Fabricator. I advise him in a modest tone and offer the next data slate. The priest doesn't call bullshit on my obvious lie and simply looks it over. Armed with Volkite guns in the broadside and 3 turrets to void any weapons, this corvette has instead the upgraded Gala generators and 100 internal choke points to repel boarders. He thinks it over while I finish my wine. I think I see something that could damage anything organic, like orcs and tyrannids. The Ultima sector is indeed crawling with biological threats, beside the usual foes. I fake disinterest and start to turn away. I'll try to send something better next time, Fabricator. I manage to say before a tentacle extends and sits me back down. No. It is very useful, an Estobon pattern corvette, able to match Tyrannids bioships and cleanse orc infestations. It's not your fault the pattern isn't complete, since many of the ancient relics are found like this. What would be useful to your end of hours in the Eastern Fringe, Lord Peth? He wonders in a hasty voice. What I want is not available though. Capturing pirate vessels has been the most fruitful activity so far. I'd need light power armor or exoskeletons, better assault boats and even teleporters. Multi-melter guns for my Astartes Guardians and any type of low-power shielding that can be made portable. A single Grand Cruiser has cost me 100,000 lives to capture, and my crew doesn't grow in hive cities like the Navy. I admit in fake sadness. There were such losers indeed, but servitors not sentient crew. The Fabricator glances at the door, and then back at me. And once more, you ask nothing for yourself, but worry about Astartes and crew, whose lives are already spent. I nod in agreement. Well, I am getting old and slow. The Inquisitor gave me an injection that should keep me going for a bit more, but then you'll have to continue without me. They shall know me by my deeds and the strength of my life. I start saying before the Fabricator stands tall and seems agitated. Perhaps not so soon, Lord Peth. You really should ask for things in return, before it is too late. As I first offered, Estobon has a state-of-the-art research facility. Stay for a year to complete an anti-aging procedure, beside your mother. And we'll try the other thing too. Blank machine spirits would be greatly appreciated by everyone, from Mars and Terra to all the forges or Navy ships. He pleads in a rather desperate voice. I reluctantly agree to receive an extra life worth at least a planet if not 2. My guards will have to stay as well. They seem to think I'm valuable for some reason. I explain in an innocent voice and look around the room for some special clues. Sadly, everything is too obscure or high-level to even start to figure out what each machine does. I recognize Auspex sensors and fire detectors, but those are common knowledge, well at least aboard a ship. Space Marines do have special treatment. They can stay and guard you, of course. I'll even see they receive better weapons. He allows politely. Overall, it is a good deal for both of us. The medical leave is not quite wasted, since my regiment and the stormtroopers get replenished with Estobon auxiliaries, and their weapons and other machines are upgraded to the now familiar retribution pattern, everything from better Auspex sensors, more durable tracks, triple-barreled multi-lasers and hunter-killer missiles. Estobon even opens a few new forges for the Estobon pattern plasma land raiders, more as a test bed for the new technology, using the damaged machines recovered from Suta as a guideline. But they also run parallel tests, and the repaired relics are about 40% worse in live-fire tests, because they lacked a topside turret. Sponson, or laterally mounted weapons are just not that effective, especially if the tank is moving. The original Land Raiders remind me of the early British tanks, slow and long and using side-mounted turrets. The new Estobon profile with the plasma gun turret is more similar to a Baneblade, although a bit taller. With atomantic reactors, they are also slightly faster and can fire more rapidly. For a month's work, they sure look impressive enough. Still, The fabricator decides to mass-produce the cheap variant with Vanquisher cannons, and only equip elite regiments of Scutari or Astartes companies with the plasma tanks. Again, logistics is the determining factor, since access to ammunition and maintenance wins more wars than superior technology, especially here, with poorly educated guardsmen expected to pilot and fire high-level tanks without proper training. I use my favored relations to order 100 such plasma raiders for the Blood Angels, and the same for the Scythes. It will help them greatly in the next conflicts, I am quite certain. While the treatment goes on for 1 year, I lose many liters of blood and any disposable genetic samples, like hair, nails and body fluids. I get prodded, sampled and scanned 1,000 times, and Justine gets the same treatment, but possibly worse. They harvest eggs and other viable cells like stem cells from the spine and outer skin layers, stomach acid and cerebral fluid. By the time the year has passed, both me and Mother look like newly born teenagers, rosy fresh skin and bald heads. I am not certain what the exact results are, but I am told it will take decades for anything substantial to be produced. I get hints of some unusual accidents and quarantined labs, so it possibly the experiments didn't go too well, like every time someone has tried to create artificial blanks. There was a mystery here that someone or something tried to keep secret. A transport ship from Giron arrives just as I was loading the regiment back to my cruiser, having finished their training and field exercises to some degree of competence. Sadly, my mentor is not on board, but it doesn't matter that much right now. The megaton of adamantium and a host of other Mechonicus relics are delivered to Forge World Istobon, and their fabricator is rather confused about the extraordinary gift. I don't doubt other people would receive a whole system or a nobility rank for such a prize. But I have no need of secular authority, not inside the Imperium anyway. Reforge the metal for a durable spine for those corvettes, I'd say. And perhaps there would be a rare or valuable weapon among these broken relics. I tell him in an easy voice. He doesn't like being in my debt. Please Lord Pef. Surely there is something you want for this huge discovery. The fabricator tells me with a strange gesture with a few cyborg arms. His red robes flutter majestically, so I take pity on him. Fine. If you insist, then I should ask for something. Some escort ships, along with a Manufactorum void ship. I have to return to the Fringe, and those people need everything, from trains and tractors to electrical generators and void shields. Orbital defenses would help greatly if more pirates or orcs attack us again. The fabricator sighs in disgust. Why can't you ask for a battle cruiser, like any normal rogue trader? He complains at my reasonable request. Still too little? Vaccines for billions of people then. A storm shield pattern for my Void Marines. Some extra incinerator torpedoes for the Lady Inquisitor. A small Titan for Lord Whitelance. The pattern for a volcano lance. A light power armor STC template. And I keep asking in a deluge of increasingly difficult demands. A flurry of metal tentacles ends the discussion. I understand, Lord Pef. Let me think what I can actually do to help. He does come through and provides me a power shield template, the minimal and least powerful design he could find in his archive. Vaccines are easy, with a whole continent dedicated to servitor and clone research, home to 1 million magi biologists of various ranks. Perhaps a few less magi now, going by the big fires I can see from orbit. Sterilization by plasma works well, but it is not subtle. Rose gets her new torpedoes, and I get my volcano lance. He adds 5 more destroyers as an afterthought, and promises to build 1,000 corvettes in a few decades, using the free adamantium I just gave him. I shake his tentacle with satisfaction, then board my ship after a prolonged absence. The crew seem happy to see me, which is always surprising. Sure, 5 of them just became captains for new destroyers, but it is still curious. Ludvius now has a combi bolter with a melter gun slung underneath, and so do all the other Astartes on board, including the Death Watch and the Scythes. They all have melee power weapons too, so I feel a bit safer. Chaos would need 1,000 demons instead of 100 to get me. It's quite an upgrade, I admit. With a promise to return, the Litany and our escort destroyers enter the warp and head for Triplex_Fal, yet another Forge world here in the Ultima sector. I immediately return to my normal routines, spending my evenings impregnating my concubines and wives, even my Rose. The rest of the schedule is split between officer training, remedial training for my body and STC heresy. I decide to create a better Sentinel Walker, with a quad multi-laser in a diamond pattern, and the nice and helpful missile launcher. I also widen the feet for better traction and grip, and install a pair of mechanical arms to the sides. It's not a knight, but at least it's something. The hands are inspired by the Magi cyborg arms and can be used for lifting or digging, or holding heavy weapons. But the largest advantage is simply better balance and melee combat. Plus they can now stand up if they fall, which is always a problem with bipeds of any origin. Perhaps my aid can somehow change the fate of the triplex FAL, if they are better prepared. But if not, I'll make sure to rescue as much as possible before the Tyranids engulf the system with millions of bioships. Deep in the Litany's vault, the rescued sounding board lies in secret and stasis, for better days. I can't even try to comprehend the deep secrets of the Zeno artifact, but I have time. With the helpful life extension treatment on Estobon, I should reach 1000 real-time years without problem. Pair that with constant warp travel and I might live even 5000 years later. And when that time comes, I should have more options available. It's true that every man has to die, but here in the dark and crazy future, one doesn't have to stay a man. I don't consider those options just yet. To be noticed by the ruinous powers so soon wouldn't be very healthy, blank or not. Mother listens to my advice and seduces Lord Whitelance, and a dozen of my new biologist Magi from Estobon eagerly begin gestating a new night house for me, even a few blank brothers among them. Knights might not be titans, but I'll take what I can get. Justine even admits liking Whitelance a little, as he reminds her of my brave father. My clan grows slowly in numbers and ships and overall influence, and soon I might achieve my first objective. The Blood Angels are in dire need of a cure, and back on Oliva my future blank concubines are growing up into their teens. I'm not certain what will result from this trial, but I expect good things. With a lurch, the Litany drops out of warp a bit too far from the Forged World. The Silence's Heroes announces with a pained voice. Damn it. I hope I'm not too late. The void is filled with tyrannid organisms, even a large hive ship possibly containing the Queen. Larger than a battleship, and with claws longer than the Litany, a hive ship is a formidable opponent even for a segmentum fleet. There is no such fleet here, merely a ramshackle gathering of Mechonicus, Astartes and other ships, possibly rogue traders or a local naval squadron. I lean back in my command chair and exchange a glance with Rose. She has the same idea, obviously. My tiny fleet doesn't even tinkle the attention of the hive fleet, which is possibly great. This Forged World, Triplex FAL is considered the largest shipbuilder in the Ultima Segmentum, with many enormous shipyards in orbit, building the largest ships still possible for these days, medium-sized battleships. They build smaller ships and space fighters too, but the focus is on the large ships, and they take enormous quantities of minerals and work hours to construct. The flow of mineral barges has obviously stopped, as did the large ship construction. If I managed to save the shipyards, it would be nice. There are a dozen battleships under construction and perhaps 3 times as many cruisers, while a host of smaller ships are being rushed into battle without full armor and point defense weapons. Rose immediately takes charge by her inquisitorial powers, and starts assembling the defenders into a semblance of order and a line of battle. It even works, to some degree. Concentration of armor and firepower does give an advantage to the smaller force, but only as long as that force stays mobile and avoids getting surrounded. She keeps glancing at me after every order, as if I was the one in charge. Wait, I should be the one in charge. Lady Inquisitor, I'm certain you can manage for some time, right? I ask just as a frigate in the defensive fleet gets grabbed and snacked upon by the hive ship. Only if you find a way to save the day, Lord Pef. This isn't quite what I've been trained for, she mutters in a colder voice. I nod and glance around the bridge, as everyone stares at me, even the Death Watch Marines. Come on guys. You're supposed to be loyal to your Inquisitor, aren't you? In difficult ground, press on. In encircled ground, devise stratagems. In death ground, fight. I declare in my best voice, quoting from memory. Ludvius smiles sadly and nods towards me. The quote might not be in the Codex Astartes, but the wisdom inside is timeless. Come to think of it, the Astartes do practice this war axiom anyway. I delve deep into the litany's machine spirit, trying to articulate what I want, and when. Without yet another headache, the cruiser listens and changes course, accelerating at our highest sublight speed. Meanwhile, I direct 4 destroyers to speed directly towards the combined fleet and provide support. The space fighters launch and head for the planet, where their firepower would be most effective. I could also send assault landers with reinforcements, but they are too slow and likely not survive the blockade. I eye my last escort holding pace with my ship, just underneath. Nah. A sacrifice is needed, but not my own. Those 2 frigates already infested by spores. Have them ordered on ram course with the hive ship. I tell my Rose while the litany recites vectors and Binharik cants on different voice channels. I do have implants though, so I can keep track of what's the relevant part of the machine rambling. The unfinished frigates accelerate on a new course, just as the Inquisitor asks them. A final, glorious sacrifice in the service of the Emperor. They were already dead, so might as well use their deaths well. Of course, the Tyrannid Queen reacts, shifting 1,000 ships to form a flesh and tentacle barrier, defending the precious hive ship. This also leaves a small gap in the swarm, just enough for my purpose. The litany fires a full barrage of torpedoes, most of them normal plasma warhead torpedoes, but one of them is not what it seems. Still, all of my torpedoes have been modified to allow a miniature organic servitor brain, just smart enough to avoid obstacles and return to course, without needing long-range transponders and telemetry. At my urging, the first torpedo shifts and impacts a cruiser-sized bioship, leaving a burning crater and wounding it mortally. The Queen ignores the other 7 torpedoes, thinking them harmless, or at least barely worth of notice. The hive ship's stone-like armor is itself cruiser-wide and thick, and it would take 100 torpedoes to create a penetration, and even that would heal soon enough. At the last minute, the regular torpedoes shift targets and cripple other bioships. No point wasting valuable munitions when there is something worse on the way. The Vortex_warhead on the last torpedo opens a warp rift that splits the hive ship into a dozen burning fragments, and demons pour out into the flesh hallways to fight the Tyrannid's warriors still alive. In a minute, the silence created by the large Tyrannid presence proves stronger and the rift closes, just like a pariah was next to it. With the Queen dead or at least gravely wounded, the hive fleet loses most cohesion and starts turning towards the nearest enemy without any more semblance of strategy. The litany fires another salvo of torpedoes and turns away, just as our lance batteries enter effective range and start discharging city destroyer fascicles at the nearest enemies. My escort destroyer fires as well, trying its best to cover the litany from the furious insects that have been tricked into defeat. We lead a flock of bioships on a merry chase around the system, slowly focusing one after another until they stop following or just blow up. Meanwhile, the combined fleet is doing quite the same, only in a tighter orbit around the Forge world and the shipyards, forcing the lesser hive ships to follow them into minefields and orbital defenses, while still protecting the ground forces of Titans and Scutari and Astartes with orbital fire or extra troops. Battle automata from the special Mechonicus regiments emerged to shred Tyrannid bioforms with exotic weapons like electric claws and neutron lasers. Scutari raiders fire Volkite calivers and melter guns with perfect accuracy, each of them killing 100 bugs before dying without a scream. Tanks and Titans, armsmen and Astartes fight side by side, lasers and crack grenades filling the polluted Forge world air with more and deadlier effects. My space fighters strafe Zootropes bio-titans and unleash a barrage of missiles, doing some damage, though it's not sure how much. They turn around, fire their laser cannons and aid the ground forces resist for longer. By next day, the ground fight has aligned on improvised defense walls and long lines of tanks and other Mechonicus machines. Combat servitors emerge to stem the tide and replace lost allies. Sometimes, the wounded are simply cyborgized on the spot and sent back into fight. More and more ships begin to arrive to support the Forge world, some by accident, others by rushing with intention. Triplex FAL offers free emergency resupply with reactor rods and torpedoes at the smaller shipyards, and so I arrive to do just that. I even sent a dozen landers to deploy hydras and chimeras at some difficult spot in front of a large Titan manufactorum. Then I turned towards the Astartes guards. Anyone wants to deploy and fight a little? You must be getting bored to death around me. I ask in a curious voice, and notice my Auspex crew smile like it's an inside joke. They nod as one. One of us should stay anyway. Rookie, you're it. The scythe captain declares, pointing at the most decorated veteran in the squad. The man pouts and sits back on the plasteel pedestal. It's not fair. He complains in a childish tone and starts cleaning his new combi bolter another time. Like fifth time only today. Perhaps I was right about being bored to death. Ludvius sighs and glances at me with a puppy eye. Can I trust you to stay put on the bridge? He asks with small hope in his gruff voice. I just wave him away. Take super extra hammer clips. Make it double. Rose giggles and gestures at her own pouting Death Watch Astartes. Go have fun, boys. The Marines salute and run towards the hangar bay, already bragging who's going to kill the biggest Nid. Damn idiots all of them. I already killed the biggest one, the hive ship. Didn't even have to lift a finger, using the machine spirit link to do it instead. Funny enough, the silence makes vortex warheads much safer to use, as the rifts would close pretty soon. Then I see an eager Auspex engineer bouncing in excitement in his Acel couch. Perhaps the stupidity isn't reserved for Astartes. Humanity has been bred and indoctrinated to glorify bravery in combat. A good thing too, when living in hell. Then again, I wasn't much better. Just did things on a greater scale.